Welcome, Zach. It's great to have you with me today. I appreciate you taking some time. This is the first of a series that we're going to start doing here at the IDN directory. And today, what we wanted to really showcase was kind of a supplier mindset and kind of the trials and tribulations that you face in the industry. Obviously, you're half of the equation, being a seller into the hardest space there is in the hospital space. I truly believe that. And I always talk about it. It's like hitting a baseball because it's one of the hardest things to do. And there's no really straight shot on how to do it. And so I'm always interested in hearing perspectives from people that are in the business, that are having success, and that are working for great companies. And you are that person, Zach. So welcome. Thanks for being here today. And where are you coming in from today?
So I'm with SurgiShop coming in from Tampa, Florida.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome. How's the weather down there in Tampa today?
It's wonderful, bright, sunny. I think it's 85 degrees, so not much to complain about. I know some people around the rest of the country aren't as fortunate, so
Correct. That's correct. Yep, you're absolutely right. Got to enjoy that good weather when you have it. But what I wanted to find out starting off today with was obviously we all have a path and we all have a mission in life. And so just tell me a little bit about yours, Zach, and kind of like how you maybe a little bit how you got into sales. And now that you're in here working with SurgiShop, kind of what your mission is.
absolutely. I mean, it's very important too, especially being in sales. You have to be passionate about whatever it is that you are selling. And for us, it's really about helping people. When I was introduced to the third party industry a little over 10 years ago, during the interview, it was explained to me it's very simple. What we do is we buy surplus inventory from facilities that are no longer able to use it. Typically, the only alternatives they have is to either donate these items or simply throw it away. And what we like to do is be able to pump money back into supply chain, as a lot of these surgical disposables are very expensive. And in doing so, because we're not working with big distributors or because we're not working with the OEMs themselves, that's how when items go on back order, we're able to help improve patient care by supplying those devices that would otherwise cause for case cancellations. And when there's cost containment issues, especially for like high benchmarking surgical categories, we're able to offer some relief and cost saving solutions. So when you really look at it, what we're selling is help. And from attending all these past conferences, supply chains, it sounds like are in desperate need of putting money back into the supply chain. So if we're able to be a solution when there is surplus inventory to buy those devices, we're allowed to help improve patient care by keeping surgeries going that otherwise would have to be canceled due to backorder disruptions. And then lastly, when there's cost containment issues, like the big T word everyone's throwing around right now, the tariffs, we want to be a solution where otherwise facilities sometimes feel stuck.
Wow. That is a great service that you're providing. I mean, obviously, cost savings are but being able to repurpose those unused items and really not take them as a complete loss is a huge piece. And obviously, some of those things do have a shelf life and kind of an expiration date. So being able to offer that service is essential. And obviously, just like you said, the big T word with the tariffs coming, that's going to be changing the game revenue wise and expenditure wise for these hospitals. So finding ways where they can cut, you know, efficient corners, as I would say, is super important for those facilities. So good on you for doing that. What I would call God's work there, my friend, because saving money is God's work in the hospital space for sure. Um, Obviously, it's never a straight path to success. And so, what would you say, in your expertise and your time in your field, would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you would say you face in your job?
So it's not just really my job. I feel like it's all sales jobs, and that's really finding the key player, the individual, and then being able to grab their attention to be able to really present your value proposition to the correct individual. So the people we're working with, supply chain directors, value analysis members, contracting, they're very busy. I mean, we've had some supply chain executives say that on a non-busy day, they're receiving more than upwards of 300 different emails. So even if you have a good value proposition, just having it fall in the right eyes and then being able to carve out 15, 20, 30 minutes of their day, just so that way you can kind of explain some solutions you might have for them. Sometimes it just takes a while for that to unfold. And it's not to any fault of these executives. I mean, they have a lot of different job responsibilities. So that's where with us, it's just that persistency of respecting their time, but then just making sure that your email or your call wasn't overlooked. In that way, once you are able to pitch the solution, if there's no way that we can help, that's all good. But a lot of times when you actually do get 15 minutes of someone's attention, they're normally like, okay, we're actually facing this, or this challenge. What solutions might SurgiShop be able to offer? And that's typically where we're able to find some common ground and be able to help out in the long run.
Great. No, that's great. I mean, that is a huge challenge getting in front of these people and really getting access to them is one of the hardest parts. I'd say for me, that's kind of where I come into the cog is helping people get access to those hard, hard to reach places, those hard to reach leaders, at the IDN directory. But, it's not just as simple as getting access to them. You have to know what to do when you're in front of them. And I think that's why the supplier mindset that I'm getting from you today is so important because, as much as access is great, being able to coach people on how to be successful in that realm. And it is a tough ring, being a former martial artist and fighter, I can say for sure I would offer getting into the ring with a karate man any day over probably getting into the ring with a supply chain leader, just because it's hard work and it's definitely you have to keep your hands up, as we say in the fighting world. Um, so this brings me to an interesting question here. And it's funny, I was talking about this today with an old colleague of mine, and she was saying how the supply chain leaders, like you said, are so busy now, and they're getting so many emails that they really don't want to get on a call with you unless there's a real key differentiator. And that's what I wanted to ask you about kind of SurgiShop and a little bit about the differentiation, because that is such a key point for these supply chain leaders to even take your phone call. When there's a lot of companies that are doing the same thing out there, having those differentiators are super important. And so for you guys, what would you say is your really key differentiator that helps you get in front of these leaders?
I'd say it's really our flexibility. The way that we like to approach things is I know we do quote unquote sell products, but we're not introducing any new devices into health systems. So we really need to understand the health system's needs and wants, and then figure out how our business model can fit into their mission. So where a lot of different companies out there, they have a way that they do things, and you need to do it this way. We're a lot more flexible. You tell us how we can work with you, and then we'll figure out internally how to make it work. So we have some facilities that they have a centralized distribution warehouse, and they're like, look, we want to do bulk orders. Can you can we do bulk order purchases with you? Absolutely. We have others where they have the infrastructure in place to set up us as a prime vendor. So if we're set up as a prime vendor, they then can do automatic ordering to each one of their facilities, and that's where we can just ship out to each facility. Some facilities are like, look, we just want to reach out to you on a daily basis and say, hey, Zach, here's what we need today. Do you guys have these items in stock? Absolutely. We also have free FedEx ground shipping on all orders with no minimum purchasing requirements, and also have a return policy where anything a facility buys from us, they can send back for any reason. That means if the case is canceled, the doctor leaves,
Wow.
even if it accidentally expires on their shelf, as long as they bought it from SurgiShop, they can send it back for 100% credit for any reason. So if you really think about why this industry exists, it's simply due to surplus. So if we're selling you something and then we're like, whoa, that stinks, you don't need it any longer, we're not really helping the cause, so to speak. So that's where we really want to be an all-around solution to where people also feel comfortable working with us. So any documentation, any questions they might have, we're a phone call away. And that's why we really want to be able to have that quick 15, 20-minute conversation where we can elaborate on our business model and then see what challenges or reasons why facilities wouldn't want to work with us. And then that way we can just answer and say, here's what we've done for other systems. Because also, no two health systems are the same. They might have similar titles, they might have similar methods in how they procure different devices. But at the end of the day, they're all like snowflakes in the sense that there's no two that are identical.
Yep, and I think that's exactly the MO that makes it smart. and swings now analogies a lot, just because being a former sportsman, I always find that the truth is that the realm of sports and the realm of selling, a lot of it has to do, a lot of them have, there's a strong parallel, just because I see the discipline factor. And I think in sales, you have to be disciplined, you have to be persistent, and you have to be creatively persistent. And that can mean a lot of different things. And like we were talking at the IDN Summit at the Eagle's Edge there, you had mentioned, if a door shuts, it's exciting for you because it gives you an opportunity to keep that process going. And so you really love the chase. And I think it's something that's really, really telling about you, but also I think that it's super important to keep that vibe alive as a salesperson, is to always say, hey, when the door shuts, this is an opportunity in a different direction. And so we have to find a way to garner that. And a lot of sales folks don't do that. So kudos to you for keep getting up at the plate, keep putting the bat in your hand, and going out there and taking those swings. That's super, super admirable, I could say.
Well, thank you. And real quick, what would you say is your biggest differentiator between your competitors?
So for us, thank you for asking that, Zach. For us, I would say for us, the biggest differentiator is how quickly we can get you to your contacts, and also how we can streamline. The IDN directory is a search tool, and basically we have the ability to basically help you get from A to Z much faster than some of the other platforms that are out there. We have also our licensing agreements are really, really special because they give you an opportunity to have unlimited seats and no extra cost. So, but I think for us is what we do better than most is we streamline the top levels purchasing folks at the IDN level, which is where we really focus our energy. And we do it better than anyone, is we can say, hey, look, you need to get, like you said, that triple threat, those chief supply chain, those value analysis and procurement people all lined up in one place where you can quickly access them. That's, I think, what we do really well at the IDN directory. And so I think for us, that's kind of our big differentiator. You have to have a national accounts team. You have to have hunters that are going after the IDNs. But as long as you fit that profile, we can do great work together, because I think that the access is the hardest part for people to get, finding out who those key players are. But then again, once you find those key players, it's so important to find those strategic elements. The IDN directory can do that a little bit by giving you some news articles, featured content, webinars, and things to kind of keep you in the know as to what's happening in the industry. One thing I can say is sellers often want to sell their product, and they forget that they have to forge partnerships. And they also have to understand that there's different people in the realm of their sales that they can connect with. It's not just, hey, you got the supply chain guy and he won't talk to you. Well, now you have a value analysis person that maybe you can talk to. Maybe now down the chain, there's a procurement person you can talk to. Maybe you're more of a, environmental services company. We have those people too. So we can basically get you access to basically the top call points at the IDN level. But then what you do from there is basically why we want people to hear this sequence here, this session, because it's so important for people to understand what they need to do when they get to that. And somebody out there may hear this and say, you know what, this is really good information, and Zach is really kind of giving me the key to how to be more successful in this space. Since we're talking about IDNs and GPOs here, let me ask you a question. Obviously, working at the hospital level is one thing, but working at the GPO and IDN level is kind of another. Like, how would you say GPOs and IDNs kind of factor into your sales strategy?
They are our sales strategy.
Okay,
If it's not a
great answer.
standalone hospital, or like a surgery center that's a part of a conglomerate, that's where everything's done now through IDNs and GPOs. And so while you can, I guess how we go about it is top down and bottom up.
Okay,
So when you're reaching out to a GP or to an IDN especially, you can go on the website, you can fill out the new vendor application, and you can try calling the corporate number. You might have a little bit of success there, but where you're really going to have a big impact is at the conferences. When you're able to get in front of these people, have a meaningful conversation, so that way when you're able to get the email and shoot them a quick follow-up to try to get a presentation put together via like Zoom or Google Meets or Microsoft Teams, that's how you're able to accomplish it from the top down. But then from the bottom up, when a back order is going on, the first people that hear it are the troops on the floor. your surgical buyer, your procurement team, the people at the actual facilities. So that's where what we like to do is also reach out at the facility level, say, hey, we're trying to work with corporate, but one of the big, solutions we're able to offer is with back orders, or if you guys know of a surgeon leaving next month and they had some physician preference items that only they're able to use, we might be able to be a resource for your team as we buy surplus. We can help out with back order situations. So that's where sometimes someone's like, hey, look, you're right, that's all done at the corporate level, but send me a quick email so that way I can get you in contact with the actual decision makers. And then now you have somebody internally pitching your solution, and that's where you're able to get everyone on the same page. So really it's kind of a two-step approach. And however you get the decision maker fastest, that's what we're trying to do, because we don't want to go outside of what a system has in place as far as standards and operating procedures, but we really want to make sure that they understand what type of solutions we can offer. Because if you don't know you have a tool in your toolbox, then how do you know to use it when that situation might arise?
Oh man, that's a brilliant answer right there. And I love how you mentioned before how everybody needs to be on the same page. I can say for sure that one of the things I've learned with contracting is that sometimes there's a disconnect, sometimes even internally between different sales teams on how their messaging is going to be. And so it's so important that the sales team has their messaging in place, but then also being able to convey it with that leadership team. And then that's usually where you see a lot of good success happening. When it fails and breaks down, it's because sometimes and often it's because the sales team isn't aligned with their messaging and they're not as prepared as they could be. So it sounds like you guys are doing it right. And that's what people want to hear is what's the cleanest way to go about doing this, and making sure that because I have to imagine that first 90 days, once you get the initial buy-in, I should say the buy-in in principle, it's going to take you some time to get that contract all nailed down. And in that 90-day period, which seems to be kind of the most common time frame, that's where a lot of contracts fail, is because during that 90-day period, there's just things get thrown out of sight, people get busy. So it's super important to have that messaging clear right from the beginning so that you can, close the deal as quickly as possible. So great answer on that one.
Thank you.
So let me ask you this. Since we're talking about decision makers, right? And you've shown how, you guys go about, once you get in front of those decision makers, what you do. But the big question is how do you find those decision makers, and how do you decide who the right decision makers are for you with what you're using today, or any tools you may be using, or if you're just doing it organically through, pounding the phones or hitting the ground, running, like how do you guys do it?
So, I mean, I think the saying is, there's more than one ways to skin a cat.
Sure.
So, there are great databases like the IDN directory where, you're able to you're able to figure out who some of the decision makers are, but there's also networking. There's people, especially in cities where just because you're working with one health system, they know people at the other health systems too. And
Right.
everyone's talking. So word of mouth's really big, where you're able to really help out one system. That's where they feel a lot confident to when one of their friends, maybe in a different health system, is struggling with something. They're like, hey, do you mind if I share your information with them? Then, as I just previously discussed, we call, we call through the hospitals. We try to figure out who the decision makers are. Sometimes people don't know, sometimes they do know, but they don't really want to give out the information. So that's why they're like, hey, just send me an email and I'll forward it up internally. And if there's any interest, they'll reach back out to you. But honestly, one of the real big ones we've had a lot of success with is the conferences. Getting out, especially like reverse expos, where you're able to sit down, or not really sit, you more stand at the booth, and
Sure.
you give them your elevator pitch as far as, hey, we're here to help you with surplus inventory. We can help with any back order situations that relates to surgical disposables. And then if you're facing any cost saving initiatives, we might be a solution for you. So when you have a really concise pitch, and especially when we're not technically selling anything, we're not introducing any new products into facilities, that's where sometimes the decision makers are like, this is a really interesting business model. I've never really heard of something like this. And even if they're not the one that they directly oversee it, it's something then that they might want to share with one of their counterpoints to be like, hey, is this something you might handle? I had a really interesting conversation with Zach at SurgiShop. Can you maybe try reaching out to them and having a quick 15-minute meeting to see if it's something that they might be able to help our health system with? So really trying multiple different approaches. And then especially when you have 5 different people within a health system saying, Steve Smith's the guy, Steve Smith's the guy, Steve Smith's the guy. Well, now you know who the decision maker is. You can try emailing. If you're unable to get a response via email, then that's where you have to try to figure out a way, maybe at a conference, a networking event, trying to have maybe someone in a different health system reach out. And then that way, if Steve, finally reaches back out to you and is either like, yeah, let's set up a call, sorry, I get 400 emails a day, I just never saw yours, or it was marked as external. So, I don't open any external emails. But
Sure.
that's where really getting that human interaction really helps you, figure out who the decision maker is as well.
Absolutely. No, I'm a big believer in all of what you said, especially getting out to those trade shows. The live events really do provide, really great opportunity to get in front of people. I think phone calls are great, Zoom meetings are great, but getting in front of people and really being able to ask the questions, seeing the reactions on people's faces, and really kind of feeling what's happening. I think that's super, super important. And with, like you had mentioned, kind of the reverse expos out there, that's a great way to get in front of people instead of having to sit at a booth and wait. Sometimes you can go out there and kind of control your destiny, as I say. So that's a great way. And good that you guys are getting out there in the field, because that's super, super important. I notice many companies sometimes keep their sales guys locked down tight and want them just working from the office, and don't necessarily put the investment into sending them out into the field. And I think that's where the best work is done. So kudos to you for keeping that initiative alive for the salespeople out there. They need to keep doing that. So here's a question I have that's kind of a supply chain leader versus a clinician or administrator person. And so I don't know if you guys work with clinicians or administrators as much as you would work with kind of the supply chain leadership. But if you had to say, do you ever have to, if you do talk to those different people, if those people do come into your wheelhouse, do you change your messaging to kind of suit a more kind of administrative person versus a clinical side, or is the message pretty much the same for you? Or do you have to kind of appeal to more of that clinician mindset when you're talking with them?
So, I mean, especially the clinician, they're definitely going to be a lot more interested in the back order situations,
Okay.
because that's definitely patient care, even the supply chain. I mean, all throughout the health system. I mean, if you go to any one of these conferences and they say, "What's our mission?" Always at the forefront is patient safety and improving patient care. So that's where with us, when they hear we can help with back orders that prevent case cancellation, it really perks their ears. And then supply chain, they love that. But also, when we're able to talk about cost saving initiatives, they like that too, because they're normally under the gun from their CFO saying, "Hey guys, we have tariffs going on, we have all these other price increases. How can we become more profitable?" I mean, I saw it was at one of the last conferences. I believe they said that it was like 37% of the country is operating at a positive revenue. So that means 2/3 of the country isn't. So
Right.
that's why when you get talking to supply chain people, you also have to understand what objections they might have. It's probably be something in contracting, the way that the language in their contracts is written, why they might be a little hesitant to work with us. So that's where it's really knowing, and listening to these health systems and understanding what areas you might be able to help out with. For example, if they're on a letter of commitment where they have contractual obligations to hit a certain spend requirement, we never want to interfere with that. But if you're ordering on like a letter of participation, which is based off of a tiered volume based discount, so the more you spend, the more you save, that's where we have a little bit of wiggle room sometimes to be able to offer upwards of 30 to 60% off what you're having to pay from one of the big distributors.
Hmm.
So what works for one system for cost savings might not work for another, but that's where it's really having that good conversation to identify what categories can we help out with. Then we can take a look at our inventory and based off of your usage, be able to come to an understanding of, yes, we can help here. No, this one, we don't really source these items in that type of bulk that you guys would need, but normally figure out some type of a solution that's able to offer. I mean, we've had some health systems say, "Hey, this past year, we saved well over $1 million buying simply a handful of items from you." So when you're able to have that type of a big impact, even off such a very limited scope of what, as far as what we're actually sourcing, that's the music to our ears. That's the type of impact we want to have for a lot of these health systems.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. And another great answer. You're very clear and concise on how you answer these questions. So I love it.
Thank you.
So let me ask you a couple more questions here. We talked a little bit about right now, we're talking a little bit about, making sure you're good for your supply chain leader, taking care of them, listening to the system. So obviously partnerships and forging partnerships is important to you. And so that's what I would ask you next is what are some of the things that you find are really important for you, but also just in general for other sales leaders to do? I mean, like we described that there was not a one size fits all, but I do believe that business making and customer service and partnership building is something that can always be done. And what are some of your tricks or some of your I would say success points that you've had? And what do you think, for building that partnership, that trust and alignment? Like what are some of the most important things, like advice that you could give salespeople today about that?
So one of my past mentors he said it best, friends buy from friends. So how do you become friends with somebody? And if you really think about who your friends are, it's people you trust. It's people that will tell it how it is, and if you know how they can help, and they're always there for you. So just sending an email, maybe having an initial phone call, you're not going to gain that trust off that first phone call. You have actions speak louder than words. So you really have to show it and demonstrate that. So how are you able to do that? I mean, we've had some systems reach out saying, "Hey, Zach, here's where we need help in. What can you guys do?" And it might be an area that we just don't have a good sourcing availability for. It's just things we don't really see come up as surplus. So that's where, we have to be transparent and say, hey, look, we might not be able to help you, but have you ever heard of and name another company and then, be able to try to provide a solution for them. So even if we're not getting the business, trying to, at the end of the day, put yourself in their shoes to think of a solution that'll help them, tackle whatever objection it is that they're having. And then as well, I mean, what type of salesperson, likes you just lower pricing? Not many. But if I see that we've inbounded a ton of a specific reference number and I see a health system buys it from us pretty regularly, I'm the first one to be going to our leadership team saying, hey, look, we have a loyal customer that's doing X amount in spend with us. We have an overstock on our end for these SKUs. Can we take a look at what our acquisition cost is and see if we might be able to offer them even better pricing? So
Mm.
that way, we sometimes are able to send an email to some of our customers out of the blue saying, hey, I know you've been buying this from us at, let's say, $400. How does $350 sound moving forward? We were able to, source these a little bit cheaper, and we really want to help you guys hit your savings goal. And that's something that a lot of people have told us, like, you're one of the only companies out there that just offer, without even asking for it, sometimes better pricing. It's kind of unheard of. And that's because at the end of the day, from attending all these conferences, we really understand some of the challenges supply chain leaders are facing when it comes to cost containment. So the more of a solution that we can be for them, the more likely they are to want to reach out to have us help them with any future problems they might have.
Mm.
So that's why at the end of the day, it's really treating people, your customers, as your friend. And then, as time goes on, hopefully it becomes, kind of bilateral in the sense that they start viewing us as a friend. To where
Absolutely.
when they have a challenge, the first person they want to call is us to be like, hey guys, this just came across my desk. What can you guys do potentially to provide a solution? And then we either can or be open and transparent and say we can't, but have you guys ever considered blank? And then sometimes we hear things from talking to other health systems and what they've been able to do to overcome some challenges. So that's where we've been able to, be more of a consultant in that type of a sense.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And so what you've done here is you've basically not just been a partner within the contracting space with just trying to get a deal done, but also you're a partner in the industry and you're transparent about it. And I love that. And I think that's super important is the resourcefulness of a company to me shows that you can not just focus on selling your product all the time, but really be invested in solving the problem at hand, even if you can't solve the problem for them personally. And I think that that to me is a big eye opener and needs to be more of it's kind of like almost like being grateful. It's like being grateful. Like you can always be grateful for what you can do And if you can't help them, it's okay, because you can be grateful to give them somebody else that maybe can help them. At the end of the day, when that problem gets solved, they're going to know you solved that problem. Even if you push them in a different direction to help them work with another company or somebody that can help them more efficiently with that specific category, that's really being an industry partner. And I think that's what being, I think that's the true crux of what it means to be a partner in this industry. Like, I call myself an industry partner because I tell my customers sometimes, I'm like, look, I want to do business with you, but if you end up in a jam somewhere, you need a name, or I can help you with something, just call me and I'll see what I can do. And I'm always happy to see if I can do that. And I find that that's always something that I can do, right? That's a customer service piece. And I feel like, like saying please, saying thank you, those are things that you always can do. And I feel like even if you can't help people on the surface, you can find other ways to help them and be a good partner for them. So that's wonderful.
Well, that's something that, ever since you and I have met, when you talked about mission, what's your passion? I mean, you genuinely want to help people. And
I
that's
do.
even like you just said, hey, if you're ever struggling with something, reach out to me. Let me know.
Yep,
Let me see how I can help you. And even if we don't do business, I'm always here for you. And
that's
that's
right.
something that, I've expressed to our leadership too. It's like, man, PJ gets it. Like he definitely
Thank you.
understands that human element to it. That's like, how can we be a solution? How can we help each other?
I,
So
I agree. And I think for me, that's, and I appreciate you saying that. That's kind of the most important thing for me, is just really being a good kind of customer centric person. I really love to help people in any capacity that I can. And so for me, we share the same space together. It's almost like we work at different jobs for different companies, but we're in the same industry. So it's almost like we're all going to class together. We're all learning the same pain points from each other. And so it's kind of like, yeah, you know what? It's almost like, hey, you go to the other high school, but guess what? This pep rally, it's for all of us.
yep.
And I think that's something that's just super important. So I love, working with guys like you and people in the industry that are invested in not just their own benefit and their own company benefit, but also invested in just the whole ecosystem of healthcare and kind of the industry. So I have two more questions for you, my friend, and this one's going to be an interesting one, because obviously we've gone through huge transformations in the last couple of years with healthcare, COVID being obviously the one that kind of tipped us on our head. But now we always come back to the big T word, right? Tariffs are coming. We're seeing how it's affecting the industry, right? I was at FAH, IDN Summit like you were. I'll be at HCP in a few weeks. And, I went to HIDA, and the big, word on the block and word on the street is tariffs and what it's going to do. And so you being a guy who's been in the industry for a while and seen different trends happen, come and go, what would you say are you really watching closely trend-wise over the next 1 to 2 years in your field and just in general in the field? What do
Right.
you think is going to really change some things?
So before we go into the next 2 or 3 years in the trend, we have to almost go back in time a little bit. So when I first started out in the third party industry back, I believe it was 2015, 2016, so about 10 years ago, when I call in third party, a lot of the IDNs and a lot of the health systems, they didn't want to hear it. They were like, look, we know what you guys do. You're the surplus guys. We're good. We don't need that. There's never going to be that type of problem. Well, then Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico and knocked out Bard's manufacturing plant. All of a sudden, I still remember the day. I was in my office. I probably had 10 different health system executives reach out to me, being like, Zach, got this email from a couple months ago. It says back orders. Do you guys do anything with Bard mesh by chance? And I was like, yeah, we have some of it on our shelf. And within a couple of days, we sold out of all of our Bard mesh and people were astounded. They were like, how do you guys have it when the big distributors or even the OEM doesn't have it? I mean, the manufacturing plant gone. How is the company never heard of able to have Bard mesh? And we were like, because how we acquire product, it's through surplus. So our inventory is limited, for particular SKUs. There's others we see semi-frequently for whatever the reason may be. But that's where the first eye-opening, where a lot of health systems were like, okay, I got your info. We'll keep you guys in mind. Well, then the big C word came around, COVID. And I mean, you had doctors leaving from some states that weren't allowed to perform elective surgery to move to states that were still operating. So in those, I mean, we had some health hospitals say, hey, look, our whole ortho program, we're just shutting it down. So now they had all these supplies. Well, what are we going to do with it? Well, that's where they turned to companies like ours, sold the inventory, and then there were back order disruptions. It seemed like every week there was a new item going on back order. So a lot of facilities started reaching out, being like, hey, do you guys have this? Hey, do you have that? And we were able to help keep cases going. So then when COVID ended, it was like, all right, hey, we've now we know that something big like this can happen. I think we've adjusted our system accordingly. I think we're good right now. Well, then there was the longshoreman strike. People were like, wait, what's going to happen with this? How are we going to navigate these challenges? Again, they turned to us and were like, hey, if this goes into effect, how are, can you guys help us with these categories? And we were like, yep, we can. Then the longshoreman strike ended. Now you have the tariff word going around. So people now are reaching out, hey, can you guys help offset costs? For if we have a pricing increase, we've had some systems say that for certain codes, it might be as much as 20-25%. So we're currently facing that. So now when you look at 2026, 2027, 2028, we unfortunately don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what that next issue is going to be. But we do know that there is going to be something that's going to cause some type of a supply chain disruption. And that's where we really want our message to get out there. That's, look, even if in today's current climate, you don't need us for whatever the reason is, at least keep us in, in that special email box or that inbox you have. So that way, if something does come across your desk and you are faced with a certain challenge that you're not sure how you're going to be able to navigate it, at least you now have a potential solution. And that's where we can help try to guide and, help you guys, get past it.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess it comes back to that flexibility element with SurgiShop, because you guys can really do it all. Because what you've said there is like, hey, we had the shortage issues, we were able to solve the problems there. Then there's the tariff issues, and hey, we can help you cut your costs and not, and work around that. So obviously, the trend for sales folks and for companies is also to be flexible, to learn that flexibility. Make sure you can provide when the shortages happen. Make sure you can provide those cost savings at the drop of a dime. And I think then you can keep putting food on the table. I think that's a good place. That's a very good place and a great way to answer that question. And so I'm going to come back to that final question. My final question for you today is, you kind of touched on it before, but I want you to take yourself out of it this time. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of, you're a sales coach and you're basically coaching the future generations of sales leaders tomorrow that are going into the same realm that you're going into. What would you say is the absolute best advice you could give to salespeople today that are going into specifically people that are going into selling in the hospital space? Because that's what I really want to focus on. And what would you say, if you had to give somebody some pointers like, hey, PJ, I hear you're getting ready to go into sales, and, sit down with me for a few minutes and I'd love to tell you a little bit about what you need to be prepared for. So what would you say is that best preparation you could give those young salespeople today?
Absolutely. So it's a couple things. One, passion. PJ, you're a very passionate person. I'm a very passionate person. We love what we do. I mean, it bleeds in our blood, and you have to have that. If you're not passionate about who you work for and the services or products that you're currently selling or offering, you might as well go ahead and find another job, because that's going to be portrayed to the customer or the person that you're trying to sell to, and they're going to pick up on that. So then you also have to be genuine. You're a very genuine guy who always wants to help. I try to be very genuine, and we're not robots. I don't have a script here that I call you and I follow a script. I pick up the phone and I have a conversation. I want to learn from people. I don't want to tell people what I do. I want them to tell me what they do and what challenges they're facing, and then see, is there some type of solution that we might be able to provide them? And if not, thank you very much for the phone call. I've learned a lot, and then somewhere down the road, there might be someone else that's facing a similar solution or a similar challenge. And I can be like, I had this call a few months ago with, another executive, and they were talking about they faced that challenge, and here's what they were able to do. And so that's where, when you're just being genuine, you're who you are, you're a person. I'm not AI. I have a fiance, have a dog, we're real. That people like real, especially in the day of automotive and, especially with AI. You know, they want to know that you're a real, actual human being with feelings, with emotions, and you have to be able to display that. And then lastly, you have to be knowledgeable. You have to know your product inside and out. You have to know your service. You have to understand what you do. So that way, when people come at you with objections, if you already know what kind of objections people might have about utilizing your product or your service, that's where you're able to move the conversation forward. But if you're getting, objections thrown at you, and then you're sitting there like, that's a good question. Let me go ahead, let me get back with my team, and then let me follow back up with you. Well, good luck with them even reading that email after you do get the information. And
Yeah.
now you might have had a very good conversation. You might have gotten somebody interested, but you came across one little hiccup, and then time kills all deals.
Yep.
So if you got to take time to get with your manager and then take time to respond back to them, now they've had 5 other problems been thrown across their desk. You're now an afterthought. So if you're able to come up with a solution, you're able to appear knowledgeable, you're able to be genuine, you're able to show the passion, and someone's able to pick up on that, it's really going to make them a lot more engaged and want to work with you, because at the end of the day, they don't feel like they're being sold to, but they feel like they're being listened to.
Love it. That's man, that's whew. Boom. You could just drop the mic right there. But no, but that's the truth. And you said something again, a very key word that I really latched onto is problem solver. It's funny. Um, People always used to come to me and say, PJ, what's it like being a salesman? And I always used to say, I'm not a salesman. I'm a problem solver. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, I try to take it as, hey, there's really nothing I'm here to sell you on this phone call. It's more just, hey, sounds like you're having a problem getting in front of the right people. Maybe I can help you with that. And then it's just more becoming that problem solver rather than just a guy who's trying to move a unit over on top of somebody. And so I think that that's great advice that you gave people is, obviously be genuine in yourself, be comfortable in your skin, um, but also know your stuff, right? And I think that comes down to, just being prepared, knowing your product really well, knowing about the people you're going to be meeting with, like do a little research on the person before you meet with them, find out who they are, go to their LinkedIn, maybe you find some common ground with them. And I think that's something that, finding that common ground with people is usually what I find softens the blow always when you start those conversations because, it's hard to cold call people. And you're not just cold calling anybody, you're cold calling some of the busiest people out there that have seen the game and they know how to play it. And so I think that you gave great advice there.
Well, like you also just said, these
Mhm.
people that we're trying to speak to are busy.
They are.
So I guess one other note should probably mention is you better be persistent. You know, if you're a rep and you're like, well, I sent him an email, and it's like, well, when did you send the email? And you're like, oh, 2 months ago.
Yeah,
Okay, well, it's been 2 months, you didn't hear back. Maybe send them now. I'm not advocating that it's been an hour. Let me send them another email. Oh, it's been another
sure,
hour. You definitely don't want to be annoying, but
sure.
be very, very respectful of who your audience's time is and understand they're very busy. But there's also a level of professionalism, giving a professional follow-up just to say, hey, it's been 3 weeks, just wanted to check in, see if you had an opportunity to review our information. If you need more time, no worries. I completely understand. Just wanted to make sure that this didn't get lost in your inbox. And then a
Yep.
lot of times people will respond back and be like, thank you very much for following up. We had a doctor leave, we're opening a new hospital. We've had X, Y, or Z come up. Look, can you please follow up with me in a month from now? Great. Give it a month. Don't be, too pushy, but then that's where it's that professional persistence, as I like to say. So that way, you're making sure that you're staying on top of who you need to stay on top of, so to speak.
Yep. No, that's great advice. I mean, with sales folks having tons of quotas to make and tons of people they have to reach out to, making sure you leave yourself some breadcrumbs on those follow-ups is super important. And also making sure you actually execute those follow-ups is super important. So, well, Zach, this has been absolutely fantastic today. I think you've given us and hopefully our LinkedIn audience here some fantastic insight on how to be successful in the sales realm. How SurgiShop is really changing the game and keeping shelves stocked at a good price and helping hospitals save money every day. And also getting to work with a fantastic guy like yourself, which is obviously a very passionate, knowledgeable gentleman who's really focused on that customer centric partnership. And Yeah, I just really appreciate, having you here today for this kind of inaugural session. And no better way to start it than with you. So I really do appreciate that.